shall reign, he shall reign, Bona Pagade, and he shall reign, he shall reign, Bona Pagade.
So, there are very few things in the world that let you know that you might have an attraction or even a young fetish for dysfunction that might need addressing than getting into your car and using your last petrol. And guys, when I say your last petrol, I mean eyokugcina, to go see a boy. And don't get me wrong, hitting up people when you're lonely for some company is not necessarily a bad thing. But there is something to be said about people who hit you up because they know that you're lonely enough to come running. So there I am, running to this boy's place with my last petrol. And futhi yazini mangicabangisisa le ndaba, mawungena petrol ila uvela ulahleke khona kakhulu. Uyazi uvela ulahleke amasemu, uvela ulahleke into ongayazi, uvela ulahleke laleli lolu. Okay? And I remember parking on the side of the road and thinking, do I compromise my future by fulfilling this trip, going to this boy's house, hoping that somehow I'll find his address and getting there and there'll be an intercom or a security guard who can help me? Or do I save what's left of my pride and petrol and go home? And if I choose the latter, what would that mean for me? What would going home do for me? And those questions may seem minuscule, but as the episode unfolds, you're going to realize why these questions were so important. So it was at that moment where the journey to romantic and sexual celibacy began. So I went home and I didn't decide there and then that I was going to be romantically and sexually celibate. It was more of a process. It was more of a gradual process. But when I got home from going to see the man that I did not see, I remember going through like these weird sensations of emotions that I couldn't figure out what they're about at the time, but I remember just feeling very disappointed in myself and very sad for myself for weeks. And so intentionally creating a space for myself to navigate those emotions in hindsight, now that I think about it, was actually one of the first steps that I took in this journey to romantic and sexual celibacy. And navigating those weeks initially it was a bit of a mindfuck in the sense that I was going through this like weird, perpetual oxymoronic state where I didn't want to be alone, but at the same time, something bigger and better, clearly, than me was at work that was forcing me to be by myself. And in trying to figure out why I felt so bad about being alone, it was then that I realized that I was going through some kind of withdrawal from attention. And by attention, what do I mean? What did that mean for me in my life? So I'll start with my romantic relationships. I have basically been in a relationship every year since I was 17. And I can now confidently say that the majority of those relationships were really about attaching myself to figures or people who moonlighted as authoritative figures in my life and to an extent over my life. And by that I mean I dated people who I surrendered myself to in exchange for feeling like they had some kind of control over me. And I just want to quick in a hurry, distinguish and explain this brand of control that I'm talking about. So it's not that I was dating people who were telling me what to do. Okay, let's get that clear. Because if you know me well enough, you'll know that you can advise, you can make suggestions, but telling me what to do, I wish you success. But this brand of control looked like dating people who had the ability or who knew that they could distract and disarm me through their behavior. In the behavior and my response to the behavior, therein lies the brand of control that I'm talking about. And I'm still trying to figure out whether this came from me being so used to interacting with people that I dated to the point where I became immune to it, or if there was some kind of predisposition, and by the time I started dating people of that nature, I just sort of convinced myself that I liked it and it was my portion. But anyway, there came a time where full-on relationships became unsustainable for one particular reason I will get into towards the end of this episode. And so when full-on relationships started becoming unsustainable and I couldn't maintain them, that energy sort of transferred into the sexual arena, my sexual relationships. And it wasn't like I was hopping from like one zaddy to the next.
Oh, and by the by, if that's how you navigate your sex life, ain't nothing wrong with that. As long as you are clear and you are conscious, do like it's gonna be there, baby.
The issue was that I was having sexual relations with the same kind or the same brand of person that I was dating. And I speak about it more expansively in an episode, which is ironically also a two-part. I guess every relationship episode is like a two-part for me. But I do speak about it in the episode Types and Traumas, which you can either find in the comment section, in the info section, or pop up somewhere on your screen once I figured that out. Okay, so I am stuffing my face with generous but unsustainable amounts of this brand of attention, and just like anything we consume as human beings, the attention is doing something that I like. Whether or not it's healthy for me, I'm responding to how it's making me feel and not necessarily how good or not good it is for me. Turns out, this brand of attention is filling a need for some kind of validation. But here's where it gets tricky and low-key sad. I have battled with self-esteem issues for, goodness, as long as I can remember. So the attention is validating that great piece of me that is in disrepair, or that piece of me that, I don't know, perhaps like wasn't there at all.
Which would be even sadder.
And there were deep issues with regards to my sense of self-esteem, my low sense of self-esteem, in the sense that I attached much of what I was consuming, i.e. this attention, to being worthy in society. And what do I mean by that? By that I mean I knew, and I think at some point it was just indoctrinated in me growing up, but I just knew that people who were in relationships, people who were in love, people who had somebody to call theirs, were valued more and valued higher and placed higher in society than people who were single. And I know much of the discourse right now is trying to break that, but the superiority that is assigned to people who are in relationships or who have somebody to call their own, it's valued. And I wanted that. And so I dated. I participated in romantic relationships, not so much for the experience of it and the value of it as a person, but really for the status of it. And so it's that status of belonging to someone and showing the world that you belong to someone. Attaching myself to someone is how I made myself feel better, higher, more valuable. But now when romance became unsustainable for reasons I will get into by the end of this video, coitus became a way that I affirmed myself and affirmed my self-esteem. And it's the same brand of attention, right? It's the same kind of attention that lands within me in the ways that look like, because you found me attractive, surely I must be valuable, right? Because you found me good enough to lay with, surely I must be valuable, not just to you, and not just to me, but I must be valuable just, objectively. I must be valuable in society, surely, right? Now, when such things are happening at such a pervasive pace and they go unchecked, surely something's amiss, Khanyani. So this is the point where relationships are becoming unsustainable in the sense that I can't maintain them. This is also the point where my sexual encounters become less frequent because I'm just dropping out. I'm losing interest in ways that I can't figure out or explain. And now to find out who is responsible for my failures as a romantic and sexual being. Depression. And I must say this, I'm still trying to figure out if the constant and incessant need for attention and the low self-esteem are symptoms of the depression, or if these three bodies came together, formed a coalition to get me to check myself before I wrecked myself. Because if that's the case, then good looking out. Good looking out. Actually, no, not good looking out, actually, because if anybody knows what depression is or how it works, you will know that depression colonizes you, makes you a shell of yourself, so that it can start a war within you. So on the one hand, here I am not being able to show up for my romantic and sexual exploits, which then has an impact on my self-esteem because my mind says, because you can't participate in these ways, you are not valuable as a person. And instead of getting to a place of stillness so that I can confront these issues, which is where I'm at now, thank you, baby black Jesus, I wanted to fight what was happening. As soon as I got a sense of what was happening, because at the time I wasn't as informed back then as I am now. I wanted to fight what was happening. I wanted to get back into old form. And so that's why I decided in the early hours of one particular morning to get into my car and use my last petrol, to go see an oak and participate in a situation that I just couldn't accept was dragging me lower and lower. So yeah, we're here now. And so the point of this episode was figuring out why I wasn't a fan of myself and why I was living my life the way I was living it at the time, and essentially why I couldn't love myself. And this episode is important because this is part 1. And in part 2, we'll be talking about what I did to stop myself in my tracks and to really do the work of getting to the place of self-content, self-love, getting to a point where I could love myself and be able to extend that love onto anybody that I chose to interact with. In conclusion, I must say that it feels good to be back. Okay? Back like umqolo, babes. Back like umqolo. Don't forget to observe protocol, like, and subscribe. But most importantly, comment, because hearing what you guys have to say really goes a long way for me. When I hear you guys bouncing your experiences off of mine in the comment section, and when you guys be stopping me in the club and stuff, it really moves me, and it really reminds me, like, damn, we're all the same girl. And on top of commenting, I encourage you to share widely, share with your family, share with your friends, share with the people that you're dating, you're sleeping with, because you'll be surprised. You'll really be surprised, as I have been and as I continue to be, at how safe of a space that you create when you share something with somebody and they respond and say, I relate, or I think I've gone through that before, or I think something like that has happened in my life and I'm glad somebody else is saying it. See you in part 2. Take care of each other.